Okay, Mr. Jata.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Conte. Thank you, everyone out there. Today, Sunday, we want to look at the President's speech at the National Assembly this past Friday. It was the State of the Nation address to the lawmakers at the National Assembly. We are going to try to look at the President's speech, his words, against the actual numbers of the economy and the feeling of the Gambian people, see if they match or if there are any discrepancies. Dr. Conte, it was quite interesting that the President came to the National Assembly for the first time since his re-election, I want to believe, to address the country, particularly the lawmakers, about the situation of the country at this moment. So the President touched on a lot of areas. We are not going to be able to look at each of those areas, but we will summarize. Basically, we'll give an overview analysis of what he actually talked about. Dr. Conte's State of the Nation speech is understood to be a fair reflection of the situation of the country in a way that is non-partisan, non-political, but only factual, right? However, one cannot totally dismiss State of the Nation address in that light only. I want to believe that State of the Nation address are political speeches to some degree. To some degree, they also reflect a partisan view of the situation of the country. And I think it is the same way in the U.S. too. That is why in the U.S., usually the party in the opposition issue a rebuttal of the President's State of the Union address every year. The party in opposition usually do not agree in many ways to what the President reflects in the State of the Union address. And I think in the Gambia too, there's no exception to that. I think many Gambians would not really agree with the President's view of where the country is in terms of the economy, in terms of security, in terms of all the other metrics that we can gauge our country's progress over the past year or so. The President talked about a lot of areas, but there are particular areas that really interest me in the country that we will really look at. I am particularly interested in how the economy has grown since then, how the business environment in the country has fared over the past year, how the country's deficit stands as we speak, how the people feel about their lives in the country. And there seems to be some discrepancy here. The President talked particularly about how education has improved, how agriculture has improved, the many projects that his government embarked on. But even if you look at education alone, the President talked about the grade 12 results. as an improvement over last year. And he talked about his education policies has impacted the young people positively in the country. A lot of Gambians disagree with this. A lot of Gambians feel that the education, the grade 12 result this year was a disaster. It doesn't matter whether it's an improvement over last year, but it's still a disaster. And that is what we need to be focused on and find ways to improve, really improve performance in these exams. Many people also feel that the education policy in the Gambia is totally not fit for purpose, as one political pundit would like to put it. So many people do not see an improvement in the condition of young people in the country. If anything, it probably sliding back. So the president also talked about a number of other things, particularly the contribution of the diaspora to the Gambian economy, remittances. He mentioned the remittances as of January of this year stood at 777 million US dollars, which was 40% of the Gambia's GDP. This number may not seem to be accurate. It looks like the remittances has been underreported. The diaspora's contribution to the Gambian economy in the form of remittances would be no less than 60%. The last time it was reported, I think that was in 2021. It was somewhere around 60-something percent, 62, 63%. And that would be back in around December 2021, I believe. So as of January 2022, it remains questionable whether that figure, that 40% figure is accurate or not. So there might be some discrepancy there. Also, Dr. Conte, the president talked about the debt stock of the country. The country's debt servicing particularly, is around the sum of $5 billion. And 60% of that is on domestic debt. 40% is to external debt. So that's still a high cost to the Gambian people. You would see that Dr. Conte, a large portion of our budget is going to paying debt, servicing debt. And this is hovering around probably 40% or more of our budget. Probably one can argue that half of our budget is dedicated to debt servicing. And in a situation like that, you cannot expect the Gambia to make any meaningful development. There has been talk about improvement on the Gambia's budget size by like 16% from 2021 to 2022. But this is largely due to increase in grants. Revenue collection has been very dismal. The president admitted that revenue collection went down 14% in 2022. So revenue collection has been quite challenging. I know GRA is trying to implement measures to improve on these, but it's been quite a challenge. So, in my view, Dr. Conte, and this 40% decline in revenue collection was for the first 2 months of 2022, January and February, I understand. And so we are not even accounting for the time period between February and now, February and September. So one can argue that the president is trying to give the best picture of the country rather than giving the Gambians an accurate current information. So the 14% decline in revenue collection as of February of 2022 probably is the best picture, rather than giving the current picture of where revenue collection stands. So one can really argue that the government is doing its best to present the best picture of the country they can, but it may not be exactly the way it looks. It may be a little bit worse than what it is. The president admitted that tourism was hard hit by the pandemic. The arrivals, the number of tourists arriving in the country stood at 1 or 2,000 arrivals in 2021. And he said there were 53 flights per week. This is not given in comparison to any previous figures, so I do not know whether that is how bad a hit that was. And also some of the other discrepancies also in the president's speech. He talked about improvement in agriculture, but this improvement is not compared to any previous figure. So that is a blanket open statement. It did not really mean much. However, one can say that the Gambian people do not feel that agriculture has improved. Food prices continue to escalate in the country. Matter of fact, many families are considered to be facing, how would I put it, food crisis, right? Many families are not eating adequate food. They're not having adequate nutrition. So I don't see under such circumstances, unless you bring actual numbers to give us comparisons, we're not seeing the impact of any improvement in agricultural performance in the country that have measurably impacted Gambian people's lives. Gambians continue to import a lot of their daily needs into the country. Productivity in the country, I want to believe, has declined. The president also talked about the health sector, the health insurance scheme they just introduced. But one may recall that Dr. Conte, this health insurance scheme was, from the onset, was beset by scandals. Gambia, as it is known for, officials look for every opportunity to pull scams on people. And many people took advantage of this health insurance scheme registration process to milk money out of Gambian people, to carry out their corruption schemes. So as soon as the health insurance scheme started rolling out, registering people, reports of scandals started appearing. People collecting money from people, Gambian citizens. And I have not heard, since those reports started emerging, I have not heard any steps that the government is taking to prosecute people like that, other than a brief statement to announce that the government is aware through the Ministry of Health that there's people who are taking advantage of this health insurance scheme to pull out scams on Gambian people. But the ones involved in the scandal, in the scam, were never identified, were never arrested, were never prosecuted. So we don't know anything about that as of now. So a little bit of transparency could help in that area as well. The president talked about poultry farming and egg production in the country. He said poultry farming and production in the country increased by 40%, which may be true. I know there are a lot of poultry production in the country, mostly for commercial purposes. But I don't really know. I don't have the numbers how this has impacted the lives of Gambian people, and how this has contributed to reducing prices of chicken. I do know most Gambians still rely on imported poultry in the supermarkets for their consumption. So this sector needs a lot of help. In the coming weeks, Dr. Conte will probably have a guest here who is involved in poultry farming in Gambia, and we will specifically narrow down on this industry and see what are the constraints there and what are the opportunities there. That is the highlight of the president's speech. The Gambia's GDP growth stood at 4.5 in 2021. It did decline in 2022 to 3.6%, according to the president's report. And this is largely also blamed on COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war. Of course, these two events are the scapegoats in every situation. Every time I listen to anybody talking about all failures in any aspect, in every aspect, are blamed on COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. So we have to grapple with those issues as of now. I don't know how long we can put blame on these events around the world. There's a political scientist who said that when a new government comes to power, it can blame all of its problems on the previous government. But as time goes on, it becomes less and less effective and credible to put blame on the previous government. At some point, you have to take ownership of your failures, right? So I think at some point, we have to take ownership of our failures rather than continue to blame them on the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. In the U.S., the government is doing everything it can to mitigate the effect of these things, and it is working in many ways. The American people have seen improvements in their lives since the beginning of the pandemic and since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. An example is gas prices. They have declined from their heights around $5 per gallon, now around $3 per gallon. Even food prices began to go down. So Gambia also needs to do something to make sure fuel prices continue to decline, price of transportation continue to improve, prices of fares remain stable, if not decline, and food prices need to come down, to help Gambians afford their daily needs. Dr. Conte, how did you see the president's speech? Did you think the president's words reflect the numbers on the
ground? Thank you very much for allowing me to counter what the president said. To be quite candid, I'm no longer blaming the president for any information given to him. I'm blaming the technocrats in our country who are misleading the president. What I don't understand, I'm going to start with the downfall in the revenue or the decrease in revenue. They only gave the president January to February. The president made a speech. Was it the 17th? Was it the 14th, 15th, 16th of September? And no one could provide him with the actual revenue for 6 months ending in fiscal year 2022, calendar year 2022. If you go to the Ministry of Finance, you look at their website, they will always report actual revenues. No, they will always report actual expenditures compared to budgeted expenditures. But they will never report actual revenues to compare with budgeted revenues. So with the total revenues of 26.6 billion, which consists of tax revenues of 13.7 billion, non-tax revenues of 2.2 billion. So our domestic revenue, tax and non-tax revenue, was slated to be 15.9% to 15.9 billion. The project grant money, 9.7 billion. The program grants, 1.1 billion. And if you have to dissect looking at the tax revenue, it represented 51.5%. That is very scary. I wish the president would have told us, because when he talked about revenues, was he talking about domestic revenue? Or was he also talking about program and project grant revenue? That has not been identified. You cannot run a government 6 months ending, and the president has not been given the figures about the actual revenues, meaning tax and non-tax revenues, and also program and project grants. So this will force you to go into borrowing, which will eventually affect our foreign currency, and I'm going to get to that. So I'm no longer blaming the president. I'm blaming those who, because I spoke to someone who told me now in the government of the Gambia, those technocrats, they are just providing information or saying anything that suits their needs. As long as nobody challenges them, they are okay. I no longer believe the fact, that the Gambia GDP grew by the percentage that they have given. There is no way that you can have inflation, even at 11.7% that they said. I don't believe that.
It's more than that.
I think inflation is almost 30%. They're not going to tell you. So how can you have inflation and the growth in GDP? I'm an accountant, but I'm just using the accounting equation. It's not possible. Another area is that I cannot believe that they misled the president again with respect to education. The Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education has yet to tell us the total failure rate in each category. They only gave us the higher numbers, students who pass. But if you go on to do horizontal analysis by comparing current year performance with prior year performance, It will give you whether it will tell you whether the education system in the country is improving. It's not. And I don't understand up till to this day that the Minister of Basic and Secondary Education is still occupying her position, and even the permanent secretary. Because we are dealing with assessment. And the outcome of your assessment, if it is dismal, it's time to change course and have new team. And I hope also the government can take into consideration, because if you look at the number of students in the ninth in who took nine courses, was it about 3% that passed? And then when you move down to 8, the percentage increases. When you go down to 7, the percentage increases. When you go to 6, the percentage increases. Likewise, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I know that COVID had a lot to do with this, but they have not answered the question: what are you going to do with the youths that fail, the students that fail? Are you going to allow them to come back to school? Or are you going to allow you're just going to leave them out there, thereby creating a larger vacuum for our education system where we have half-baked educated people? I am the fact, that when it comes to debt structure, the debt service, which represents 23.3134% of the total budget. When the ECOWAS has demanded, that budget for agriculture should be around what? Should be around 10% of the budget. So these are things that will continue to hold us. And then talking about the diaspora remittances that diaspora sent to Gambia. I think it's high time for the government to understand that those who send money, those who are in diaspora, they are actually living in the Gambia. And why is it that for us who live here and you have a dual citizenship, they don't entrust you to run the affairs of the country? A small little country called the Gambia, but in Sierra Leone, you can be a dual citizen and run for president. So these are things that, in my view, will continue to set us back. The corruption that is going on in the country, we blame Jammeh for all the ills that we had in our country, and I am part of it, and so are so many other Gambians. But the question here is that when it comes to corruption, can we compare Yahya Jammeh's corruption and the corruption that is going on at large scale? And then when you criticize the government, a lot of people think they will say that you are sabotaging the development aspects of the country. That I don't understand and I don't get to. So these are things that we are going to see happening in our country. Inflation will fully increase. Prices will slowly skyrocket, and only the few will benefit. I don't know whether you're going to be talking about crime, but the Gambia, you're going to be talking about crime.
Yeah, we'll talk about it briefly.
Okay, then I'll spare you time. So right now, at this moment, I no longer blame the president for all the ills that we have. I blame the educated folks who are out there misleading him, because no one can tell the president that revenues decreased by 14% from January to February, but they never told him anything about revenues, whether they increase or decrease from March to June 30th. And you see the impact of salary increase that has happened in our country.
Right.
In a way, I have not done any survey, but I know that that also has impacted the price of goods.
Yes.
So which means that it has further resulted or even persist for inflation to go in the Gambia.
Yeah, at the time they were doing that, before the price increase, inflation was around 11. Now it's over 12%. So
I don't
so
even, okay.
right.
I don't even believe inflation is 12%. I think inflation is 34% in the country.
Well, that's what this central bank is reporting, but it could be more than that. But the fact is that it has increased since the increment of salaries, and prices have gone up as well since the increment of salaries. So, like we argued earlier, Dr. Conte, the salary increment was not a prudent economic move. It like we argued, it was going to impact on both inflation and price of commodities in the country, and it did. And even one can even argue, even the exchange rate. Look at the dollar; it's gone up, against the dollar since the increment of salaries. So most people who received salary increases are going to pay back in terms of high prices. So, so that so much has come to pass, I think, and we probably haven't seen the worst yet. So we'll see how this all played out over time, over a longer period of time. But I think that's the reality. Dr. Conte, also two areas that the president talked about. Um, Jammeh may have been more corrupt than Jammeh's regime may have been more corrupt than Barrow's regime, but certainly the perception of corruption now, currently, under the current regime of President Barrow, seems to be much higher than the perception of corruption under Jammeh. Jammeh was the corrupt person during his regime. Everybody else was scared to get involved in anything. Now in Barrow's regime, everybody is emboldened. Nobody is scared of being fired or going to jail or anything. Because Jammeh could wake up any morning and arrest you and throw you in jail for just flimsy accusations. In Barrow's government, you can be rest assured that even if you are accused in broad daylight and there seems to be prima facie evidence that you have actually committed this, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not losing your job. You don't go to jail. You probably won't be publicly arrested and humiliated. Jammeh used to do all that, and people were scared to show up at the NIA. Now we don't have all of that. So, but President Barrow talked about the fact that he will introduce anti-corruption bill to the National Assembly this year. He also promised that the draft constitution would be tabled to the National Assembly. And these are very good and encouraging steps. But the president did not give any timeline for these things to happen. So that leaves you wondering whether we will actually see these things happen, during his current term, or he's going to wait until the tail end of his term and introduce these, in which case they will not be passed until after his re-election again. So we don't know. I only hope that he was able to give us a timeline when he would be able to table an anti-corruption bill to the National Assembly for their consideration, and also a new draft constitution for the National Assembly to deliberate on and ratify into law. Corruption, meanwhile, we don't have to wait for the anti-corruption bill. There are a lot of things that can be done right now to stem corruption in the country. A lot of things. We have the anti-crime bill, how do you call it? Economic crime laws in the country. And corruption fits, squarely into that. So people should be prosecuted for there are a lot of cases that are still pending in the Gambia. No serious effort is taken against them. Even gather evidence of those. The ports case is there. The gas petroleum case is there. You cannot even begin to count them. There's so many of such things there. But I only hope that the president is able to expedite these things, consider them as important national interest. People are very much concerned about these things. And there's a lot of perception in the country that corruption is out of control. And with high corruption like this, or even the perception of it, it's undermining our development agenda. Because nobody is going to invest your money into that country when corruption is such a big problem there. And recently, we've even seen that even our international donors are beginning to shy away from giving money to the government. They rather prefer to give money to the Red Cross and some other NGOs rather than dealing directly with the government because of this perception of corruption. And, if it goes that bad, the country is going to face enormous economic challenges, considering the fact that we are not doing enough to grow our economy from within. We need to ramp up internal production of many of these commodities that we need on a daily basis, but we are not doing that. We still rely heavily on importing our basic needs from abroad. And these are quite untenable under the current economic circumstances. Dr. Conte, what do you see about the fact that the president talked about the anti-corruption bill and the new draft constitution that may be tabled, but he didn't specify any timeline for this? We'll talk about that briefly, and then we'll look at the current situation of crime in the country briefly as well.
Okay.
Anything on the anti-corruption bill and the draft new constitution that President Barrow talked about that he was going to table?
Well, how can he? Well, I have reservations on the new constitution because of the clause that they have there for the legal professionals, particularly judges. I'm very concerned about that because in my view, I think it was a conflict of the two folks who are lawyers trying to protect their profession. And I don't see any insight for them to reintroduce it or table it in Parliament. And also, if it comes to a referendum, I don't think it will pass because we have been so polarized. The clause that indicated the Gambia is a secular society that I believe and endorse, I don't think will be accepted by the Muslim community, particularly those who have radical views on Islam. And the corruption, the lead has to come from the president because we look at folks who are actually even chasing per diems. And the recent one is the Minister of Youth and Sports, who promised that he was going to return the money, and there has not been any confirmation on it, and nothing has happened. So in the Gambia, it seems like I still support the president, but the president cannot be aware of most of those things. But I do blame the president for giving Bakari Baji a pass. Because Bakari cannot fool us to say that someone invited his wife. No, it was through his influence that those people invited his wife, and for her to accept accept per diem once he was not in the Gambia it was a fraudulent activity, meaning reimbursement scheme, and that's what she did. And Bakari, to me, he and his wife are the same. But yes, still there are some folks who will go to the length of criticizing Barrow. But as long as I'm not naming names, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
This gentleman will go and chastise Barrow for everything. Every wrong thing that Barrow did or does, he'll come out and criticize. But at any moment in time, you mention a family member of his, he stays mute. And he did that on 2 different occasions. So how can we have political activists in our country who will only choose what they want to report on or act on, but when it comes to their family members, they are mute.
Thank you, Dr. Conte. Thank you very much. Absolutely right. I do, one thing I wish though was that I hope the opposition parties can come to a consensus on one person to represent them and issue a rebuttal of the president's State of the Nation speech. Because the president made a number of claims that I want to believe many Gambians not agree with. And I want to believe the opposition parties would not agree with. So I wish they had come up with a candidate to issue a rebuttal of the president's speech. They could either come to a consensus on one candidate, one person to do that, or possibly the large opposition party, UDP, could unilaterally do one like that. Or even parties like DOI, quite eloquent and quite astute on many of these issues, could come out and issue a rebuttal of the president's speech. But that did not happen. I hope in the future we will adopt something like that, just to make certain things clearer for the Gambian people, rather than just listening to the president's version, president's political and partisan version of our country's situation is like. Well, having said that, Dr. Conte, I suppose that's that. We will briefly look at the security situation in the country, particularly the current state of homicides in the country. Dr. Conte, up to the end of the end of the 1990s and the beginning of 2000s, crime was quite very rare. Well, murders, capital crimes were quite rare in the Gambia, right? Most of us, the only murders we could remember in the country were that of Sol Samba and Matar Shah incident, and also the Mustafa Danso incident, right? Those were largely the two that most Gambians of my generation can recall. However, during the late 90s, when the military government came to power, murders became quite common. But even there, those were mostly state-sanctioned executions, right? The homicides were very, very rare in the Gambia. Recently, though, homicides have become almost like a weekly or monthly, one can even say a daily thing in the Gambia now. One can admit that the Gambian society is getting complex. The economic challenges are getting tough. Competition is high, especially in our urban areas. So urban areas are places where we compete for resources. They are places where we compete for equity. They are places where we compete for waste disposal. So it is quite competitive in the urban areas. And this is where most of the crimes are concentrated. Recently, though, we've seen a number of homicides in up countries, particularly Bansang. I think there were 2 cases in Bansang recently, and some other remote areas in the country. But urban areas are quite challenging in terms of security now. We don't want to pass any judgments here, but I think the government needs to, of course, we always turn to the government when things get bad, right? The government, through the police, needs to ramp up their steps to curb or to put things under control. I listened to the PRO of the Gambia Police Force in the person of, I don't know if I recall her name, something Jai Gat or something like that. She's a very eloquent lady and very well spoken and very smart lady. I really like her. I like the way she addresses issues, and I like the way eloquent. She speaks very good language. And she was talking about what the police are doing in terms of the attempt to control some of these things. But I think one area she talked about that I disagree with her is that they're still hunting down two suspected criminals, suspected murderers who are on the run, and they are asking for the communities, people, the population to help them find these people. But they are not willing to give his name and his description. Well, that is not, and he cited the respect for the human rights of even the suspect. Well, I don't think can be substantiated in law. If somebody is a suspect and there's a warrant for his arrest and he's running away from the law, well, there's enough grounds to reveal his name and identity so that people can identify him and report him. There could be a communique issue for him to turn himself to the nearest police station, but failure to do that, and he continues to be on the run, even though he's only a suspect, but it's a warrant for his arrest. Well, he cannot be protected, from his identity doesn't need to be protected. I totally disagree with that. And I don't think the argument he made in that respect can be substantiated by law. So there will be enough grounds to reveal his identity and urge the public to report his presence in any place if they see it. And that also will deter people, knowing that if they commit a crime and run away, their identity will be revealed and people will be looking out for them, so making it difficult for them to hide in any community, right? But if you keep that in secrecy, then, how can anybody help you? It's not going to be possible. The elephant in the room, Dr. Conte, the recent homicide at the Friendship Hotel, allegedly committed by a lady who is under custody right now. I understand she will appear in court tomorrow. It is very unfortunate. It is believed to have happened between two people who has a romantic relationship. It is difficult. It is quite difficult. And the young man was supposed to leave the country a few days before his demise for further studies abroad. A very promising young man, works with the Chamber of Commerce, believed to be very hardworking and very smart, and has a bright future, it looks ahead of him. But this is a romantic relationship gone bad. I don't think the argument of in the how do they call it, crime of passion. This I don't think will qualify as a crime of passion in the heat of the moment crime, because it looks like, based on the evidence we have about the nature of the crime, it looks like it is premeditated and well planned. So it cannot qualify as the heat of the moment crime, or a crime. Maybe a crime of passion could be argued, but we will see how it plays out. We don't want to prejudice the case, but we'll see how it plays out. But it is very unfortunate. Dr. Conte.
Okay, to be quite candid, when I first came to this country, I watched a documentary on the Sandinistas
Yeah.
of Nicaragua, and they were talking about what happens after a military government or after a dictatorship. Remember, Somoza was there,
Right.
and all the 5 variables that they had discussed, they are happening in the Gambia now. 1, corruption.
Mhm.
2, crime. 3, drugs. 4, land grabbing. And finally, the 5th one, prostitution. I hope the government can now begin to have security measures at the airport. And I'm saying this because those criminals will now begin targeting diasporans who are on visit to the Gambia. If you go to Blaise Diagne International Airport in Dakar, actually it's not in Dakar to quite kind of, because it's 45 kilometers from Dakar. And I believe the same 45 kilometers from Bur. You cannot enter the airport without a vehicle. They have 2 military folks with guns guarding the gate. And even going in, it'll take you at least 10 blocks before you can get to the airport building. But for us in the Gambia, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can come into the airport without any security measures. I think the government needs to take a good look at the fact that if you are not going out there to pick anybody, you have no business going to the airport. Because I'm telling you, criminals may follow a diaspora visiting to know exactly where you are staying, and then they come at night and rob you and kill you. So, and then if we go on vacation to Gambia, we should be very careful about our surroundings, because you don't know who is following you, who may try to target you to take your money, much more even to kill you. So this is one area that I think we need to uh, discuss openly, because tragedy is on the way and it can easily happen. You've said something that I'm a little bit older than you. So you are talking about a few people that you heard were murdered in the country all the way up to the 1990s. Well, the other gentleman, and you're right, Matar Sol Samba.
Yep.
The gentleman, Danso,
Yep.
he was in NCP. I met him on several occasions. And that one too. And I may add maybe a gentleman in Bafaloto who thought, that there was a monkey on top of his mango tree, and he shot at the monkey, and actually it was a human being, and he killed in Brikama. I think the fourth one that I could remember, the fourth one I could remember is a guy that was killed. I'm not going to give the nationality of the individual, but the person was taken, the one who murdered the guy with a gun was taken to Mile 2, and they even brought a mattress for him to sleep on. And when that became news, people were very upset, and they took care of that. I think the fifth one that I can remember was a gentleman during a wrestling contest in Makati who hit someone with a hammer and killed him. So I can say throughout my primary school days, all the way to high school and the few years that I worked in the Gambia before I came to the United States, I could count only 5 people. So do you see what has happened, the value system in our country? And mark you, no woman was involved in this crime, in these crimes, in those crimes when I was going to school. But now it seems like the culture of our people has changed drastically. And the Muslim and Christian communities, they have responsibility to come and talk about this because Momodu Lamarana Jallo, may his soul rest in peace. I even looked at the university that he was supposed to go to, Telkom University in Indonesia. That is so sad to see a young man to die so, I mean, they were savagely. And for the lady to even say that she did it is just unbelievable. That is just the Gambia. I remember back then, I know some women, please don't take my words out of context. Years when even to see a woman with a miniskirt, uh, that was uh, that was a taboo. And how the culture, I'm not trying to say we go back to that. I'm not saying that. I don't want anyone to misquote me on it. I'm not saying that. And now to see what is happening in our country and alcohol consumption. And we are predominantly Muslim, but if you look at the per capita rate in the Gambia, the Gambians drink more alcohol than Senegalese. So these are things, that is affecting there is no culture anymore. If there is culture, is people have this self-centeredness in our country. But it's so amazing to see a female organized or premeditated to kill a talent. And please, please do not send me, because someone was going to send me a picture of this young man who died, was killed. I said, no, I don't want to see it. And then we need to respect people's privacy. So this is sad, but I hope the lady, if she did it, let her face the consequence. And if she has to rot in jail, so be it. Because she has denied a family, a talent. She has denied Gambia the talent that Momodu Ravrana Jallo could have brought to our country. Who knows that this man could have gone there, get his master's degree, and get his PhD. So waste of human talent, and it's so sad. And I have sympathy for the family, and I hope Momodu Ramarana Jallo's soul may it rest in peace. I hope we don't have future occurrences of these types of criminal activity in our country, because this is so sad. It's just, if someone tells you that this really happened in the Gambia, you will say no. But I don't know what is going on. But the Muslim community and the Christian community, they need to stand up, they need to speak, they need to engage people so that we can have some form of understanding that this type of crime should not be accepted, tolerated in our country, because it's so sad to deny a young man in the name of Mohamed Rahman Jallo to die savagely. So that's sad. That is sad.
Thank you, Dr. Conte. Thank you very much. I do have a slightly different view of crime in society. I tend to believe that crime is a social malaise. Crime is kind of, I would say, a sickness in society, right? But to understand crime, I'll take a Marxian view of crime in society. crime must be understood from the perspective of the material condition of the people in a society. We have a country, as countries mature, as countries develop, economic competition becomes intense. And some people get left out of the economy. They get left out in terms of advancing themselves, in terms of prosperity. So this kind of, increases the rate of crime in the country. And I think the Gambia, what we need to do to really tackle crime is to address poverty, is to address inequality. There's a lot of inequity in the Gambia. Women particularly have long been marginalized in the Gambia. Women largely have been dependent on men for their survival. Jammeh did a lot in terms of women's and girls' empowerment, girls' education in the country and empowerment. We need to continue, we need to build on that. We need to make sure our women are well educated and they are able to get jobs that they can take care of themselves. They don't need to be dependent on men. So because of that disparity in equity, a lot of our women are dependent on men and are at the mercy of men. So this is the situation in the Gambia. So I see crime purely in terms of the economic condition of the people. When people don't have jobs, they are not able to take care of themselves. They become vulnerable to crimes, all kind of crime, prostitution, drug addiction. We talk about alcoholism in the Gambia now. We talk about drug use in the country now. We talk about theft, armed robberies, and all this. Many of these young people, they depend on armed robbery now to get money to pay for their lifestyles. Boys particularly. A lot of our young girls, they depend on what? Prostitution to pay for their lifestyles. It may not be official prostitution, but they will go out with anybody, if they have the hope of getting some money from that person. So in order to mitigate some of these things, we need to fight for equity. We need to fight for girls and women empowerment. We need to fight for poverty reduction. We're not talking about complete equality. Complete equality is impossible. Inequality to some degree, it helps, in economic development. But, there should be a minimum level of degradation that people can go on. People should have a certain level of standard of living. People should be able to be given opportunities to take care of themselves, to pull themselves up with their own bootstraps, right? And I know everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to work hard and take care of themselves if given the opportunity. So governments should endeavor to provide such opportunities to everybody. It starts with, access to education. It starts with access to skills development. It starts with access to entrepreneurship. I see that the government, the president has said in his State of the Nation speech that the registration for incorporation fee for a business in the Gambia now has been reduced to from $10,000 to $4,000. That is commendable. That is good, and I hope it encourages more businesses to be incorporated in the country and begin to employ many of these young people. I think the government should also not forget, like you rightly brought up, Dr. Conte, the kids, the grade 12 kids who failed miserably in their exam. The government should not give up hope on them. There should be a way for these people to earn something equivalent to high school degree, something similar to a GED, where they can be functionally literate, they can be useful in industry, they can be able to take up a job and be useful. So we cannot abandon our young people. If we do, we are kind of giving up on our future, and we are going to contend with more of crimes like this. So I hope the government look at things from that perspective, and then we can forge ahead. Dr. Conde, any final word on these topics today?
Anyway, yes, for me, what we have to do collectively as a nation, Barrow is the president, and he's going to be in office for the next 4 years, 2 months, 11, 12 days.
Right.
So there is nothing we can do in terms of sabotaging anything. I think we all need to come collectively, and the opposition. You're right. I support the idea of the opposition getting a spokesperson to counter what is going on in the country, whether it is crime, whether it is education, whether it is the economy. And yes, you are right when it comes to before they made the announcement on the increment in the of salaries, the government policy stood at 53.16 or something like that.
Right.
After the increase in salaries, the government policy depreciated $1 relative to the US dollar.
Yeah.
So we talked about that. But what baffles me, how can anyone say that revenues decreased 3.3 billion and you endorse the increase in salaries? Is this an ethical dilemma? So I will continue to. I still support Barrow, but when it comes to the present state of affairs in our country, I beg to differ, and I hope the president can listen to our critics, because even though you support a person, you're not supposed to be supporting everything that they advocate. To see what is happening, people talking about stuff that is not realistic, and yet still, and anytime you say, well, okay, just like having the student loan scheme that they're trying to have, where is the money come from? And so a civil servant responded, it's going to be captured in the budget. Captured in the budget, where is it going to come from? We don't have the revenue to sustain that. And so he's going to create another bureaucracy, and who is going to be giving them the money? Because the Gambia government cannot afford to loan out 200 and some million dollars. That is even slightly less than what is allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture. So how are we going to be able to do those things? And we don't have any contingency planning whatsoever in Banjul. Everybody wants to concentrate on enlarging the port in Banjul, when it's only one way to get in there. God forbid if we have a disaster. No one is addressing the sand mining. Someone sent me a picture of the effects of the sand mining at Denton Bridge, and it's awful, and the stench, and no one is addressing those things. So here you have tourists coming in who would like to freely walk around the beaches. They can no longer do it, because who actually wants to do that? With criminals running around everywhere. You got to be a tourist, because I remember when I was going to school, we used to see tourists who would walk all the way from Atlantic Beach all the way down to the Albert Market, and they go back. But now you look at the erosion that has happened. No one is addressing that, and this is sad. And then the Banjul street maintenance, and then conflicting messages saying that the Director General of GRA said that the guy did not pay taxes, and now he's going to come back and contradict himself. But the Auditor General said he did not pay taxes. I support the Auditor General.
Me too.
The Auditor General, and then they're discounting what the Auditor General said. So in our country, you think if this was on the Jammeh, we'll have such things like that? No. So the president needs to step up before it's too late.
Well, I think, Dr. Conte, one way to understand it is that the first statement that the Commissioner General said was out of his free will. He issued that on his free will, right? The second one where he contradicts that is stage managed, right? So you can see the differences in context. So I would go with the statement that he issued under his own free will, rather than the one he gave in a stage managed setting, right? So
And then also remember, this is the same guy who said that revenues where 1.1 billion was collected in January, 1.1 billion was collected in February. Now
right,
the president contradicted him by saying that revenues went down 14%. So
right,
if total budget allocation was let me just before we go, I just wanna tell you that if the total budget, the tax revenue was 13.7 billion, and the non-tax revenue was 2.2 billion, for a total of 15.9 billion. So I was telling someone, I said, this guy he just did the average. He took the 15.9 billion divided by 12, and every month he would say they collected that. So basically, in my view, revenues went down. Instead of 1.1 billion, I think they collected only 700 million. But they cannot tell us, because the Ministry of Finance, if GRA is under the Ministry of Finance, how come the Ministry of Finance cannot report actual revenues received for each month? Tax, non-tax revenue, project and program grants. Those should, because you included them in the budget. Therefore, you should tell us the actual amounts. But no, not in this Gambia.
right.
But yet still, when we criticize, they say that you are against the development agenda. So if I ever have opportunity of meeting with the president, this is what I will tell him, that those technocrats that you have, they are misleading you and making you look bad. So you need to be strong to make sure you demand. If you are in doubt, call folks.
Yeah.
But no.
So I think what we are facing with, Doctor, many of these people are responding to a situation that they are working on. I know some of these people. I know Yankuba, the Commissioner General. He's a very good man. I consider him a good friend. And I have no doubt in his credibility and uprightness. But again, what happens when we have a loop like we have in the Gambian government? Like they said, like the IT people say, what you put in the computer is what you get back, right? So we have a government framework. We have a system where everybody has learned to toe the same line. You know what I mean? You don't want to be the one to upset and embarrass the government and rob people.
Barrow did not say that. Barrow did not say that the guy did not pay taxes.
No.
The representative, meaning the Auditor General of the Gambia, that was who is supposed to be the internal audit activity. They're supposed to be independent.
Right.
But individually, each of them will have to exhibit what integrity, objectivity, social responsibility, due professional care.
Right.
So the man has done that. Now they are even doubting his findings.
Right.
So
that is what surprises me. Government needs to stand by the auditor's report rather than abandoning that in favor of what the other side claims. Because the auditors are the ones that are really that we employ to verify what these companies or entities are claiming. So if we doubt the auditors, then I don't know where we are going now. So that's the dilemma.
We're not going to go anywhere, because in the Gambia, if you criticize, they say you are against the president's development agenda.
I know. Well, we're not going to listen to that. We have a job to do. So we are not against anybody. Our goal is to contribute what we can to the advancement of our country. If we see something that needs to be criticized, we will. If we see something that needs to be commended, we will. I'm not looking for any job in the Gambia, and I know you are not looking for any job.
Oh, I won't last long there.
So yeah. So we are only here to contribute, if I may put it that way. Anything we can, because Gambia is our country. We have families living there. We want to see a prosperous Gambia. Even if you and I get an opportunity to work in the Gambia, we will work in the interest of the Gambian people, right? We'll only do what we think is going to advance the country. So that's simply what we are doing. And we don't expect anybody to take it personal. I have a lot of friends working in Gambia, in the Gambian government, right from the president's office to almost any department you touch in the Gambia. And these people are all honorable people. I know them, right from high school all the way to college. Many of them are very upright, outstanding people. They're doing their best every day to help the country. But sometimes it is the circumstances under which we are working. Although this is no excuse, but we know that the government is the only employer in the country. The private sector is hardly, existing, except a few banks. You can find a job nowhere. I hope many people can be entrepreneurial and open up, private, entities that can employ people. But government remains the main employer, and many of these people with advanced degrees, only have to turn to government for jobs, and they need to protect their jobs, understandably. Yeah. But at some point, we owe it to our country to do the right thing, right? So that's where we are. That's the dilemma. Dr. Conte, thank you very much for being here. And we thank everybody out there who are sending us messages, their views, and watching us. We truly appreciate it. We will be right back again next Sunday with something new. Don't miss it. We'll be bringing up some more people here to look at particularly small businesses in the Gambia and how one can contribute in terms of business development in the Gambia. We will also it's my plan in the future that we're going to tap into a little bit more in Dr. Conte's accounting experience and help some of our small business owners in the country in some of the accounting principles, accounting ideas of how to, we know record keeping and is a problem, it's a challenge in the Gambia. Many people, especially in business, don't like to keep records or don't know how to keep records of their finances and how to, record keeping is crucial in finance. It allows you to look at where your business is. It can give you insights into how to improve your finances. You can better plan for the future in expanding. And so hopefully we can provide some of those ideas and insights. And those are things we are planning for the future. So we'll be right back with you next Sunday. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Dr. Conte.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you.